Alright guys, I'm so excited because today we're going to work on a Ford F-150 3.5 liter with turbo cylinder heads. We're going to first check out the camshafts and then we're going to move over to the solid lifters and then the valves. Alright, let's get to it. My friend was mentioning how the camshafts have like this sharp edge. I'm not sure if y'all can see the sharp line. So then we can proceed to sand it going up and down and also making sure you're doing a side to side motion. The line is still going to be there, but it doesn't matter as long as we get rid of the sharpness. So just as long we're sanding down with light pressure and making the full turn. So I pretty much like to know what I'm looking for before I go ahead and start the process. Which is why you can see here I am filling the cams beforehand to get an idea of how it's supposed to feel after it's been sanded down. Alright, so it's time to prep these cams for the calibration stage. So let's get to sanding. Okay, after testing out the process, I noticed it didn't take a lot to sand it down. Honestly, just let the sandpaper do the work. Once you feel that it's smooth, you can move on to the next cam. Okay, so I pretty much don't feel a sharp edge anymore. Not going to lie, it was difficult to distinguish the difference between the sharp edge and the sanded down edge. Which is why I was sanding the shit out of these camshafts because I just wasn't sure if the grooves were still sharp or not. Honestly, I was just overthinking the process, but eventually I finished. Ultimately, it could have just been that the sandpaper was clogged and I just needed a new strip. So I wanted to show you guys a close-up look of how I'm sanding down the cams. Okay, right now we're moving on to the cams, and before I actually get into them, I wanted to inspect the whole cam, like for example the lobes. I just want to make sure if they have any knocks, hits, or any deep grooves. So let's take care of that. So interesting fact, I was told that these camshaft sealing rings need to stay on because that's what keeps the oil inside. This is very important to keep in mind, especially when it's time for installation. Then you gotta check the pin right here to see if it didn't take a hit or if it's damaged. So this cam is labeled as number 2. Next up, we can go ahead and inspect camshaft number 1. In order to prevent any lube restriction, we want to unclog these oil galleries from the camshaft with some compressed air, and that'll get these galleries to free up. So first, I'm gonna prep and clean everything. So when I actually assemble, I have everything ready to go. Which is funny because what I would do is clean the parts at a time. So like when I knew I was going to install the solid lifters, I would just clean the solid lifters and then install them to the cylinder head. So honestly, doing it this way, it's so much faster and it saves you a lot of time. As you guys can see, I have a red rag because I wanted to make sure I have a soft landing for the prep parts. So I didn't show you guys earlier, but this is camshaft number 1. Again, y'all, just making sure we're cleaning the parts with WD-40. So for those who aren't familiar, these are solid lifters, which require valve lash, which generates valve train noise that's noticeable at idle and low RPMs. Solid lifters also necessitate periodic valve adjustments, according to Motor Trend. As far as Engine Lab says, at higher RPM levels, solid lifters won't pump up or collapse because they have no internal moving parts. So they deliver more performance and throttle response. This honestly sounds pretty awesome. Alright guys, so going back to being efficient. So when you can save time when working on these cylinder heads, the better. So right now what we're going to do is install the valves. But before I do that, I want to place them in order, which means a faster install. The line on this exhaust valve indicates that these valves have been seated. Hopefully when we do the vacuum test again, after the cylinder head has been assembled, it'll give us the readings that we want. Here we got the intake valves, which honestly look very nice. These are actually the original ones that came out from the cylinder head. Obviously they were cut down to get that nice even seal. So I'm sure you guys already know that we're dealing with two heads, but right now we just have one that we're working on. So here's a close-up of the cam caps. Here we have an engraving of 4R with an arrow. Here's a close-up view of the cylinder head. It just looks so much better when it's cleaned up. So with the help of compressed air, it will get rid of any dust that's been sitting inside the head. As you can tell, these cylinder head rebuilds require a lot of cleaning and attention to detail. I am still learning the steps of the process and practicing enough so that I have it down. I'm still not there yet, but I have a good feeling I will. Just be a little extra and just getting some cleaning done on the intake manifold mating surface. Alright, so I finally prepped and cleaned everything. So I don't know if you guys remember these first cam lobes number 1, they have to be facing in the opposite direction. Okay, so this is where the cam caps were installed wrong, because the arrow was supposed to be facing towards the timing, but I'll get back to that. First, I actually wanted to talk about the timing cap. So I was hand tightening on the bolts. I could tell that it wouldn't thread in all the way. Like I only did a couple turns and it wouldn't keep turning. So that's when I took out the bolts and checked that they were possibly stripped, to which they weren't. So then I went ahead and changed the bolts around to make sure the thread in the head wasn't stripped either. So once the head threads cleared, I went ahead to begin the assembly. Okay, so this is an example of learning as you go, because apparently these bolts, I'm not quite sure if they go in here or over there. So let's figure it out. As you can see, the bolts seem too long for the head, from what I could tell just by visual inspection. Then I checked on the other side as well, just to make sure. But just to double check, I went ahead and proceeded to hand tighten the bolts where the timing cap goes, just to confirm this. I also went ahead and switched the bolts around, thinking maybe it could just be the placement of the bolts. There was no difference, so I decided to test it out with the timing cap this time. Okay, so being that it was my first Ford 3.5 liter cylinder head assembly, I was going to mess up, but I'm learning. The funny part was that I assembled this thing to the finish line, as you can see from the short clips. Right after I completed the assembly, my friend comes over to confirm that the bolts were in fact too long. So that's when we checked the other box of the second set of the 3.5 heads to try to figure out why that was. As he brings out the oil bypass tube, I thought to myself, this could be the reason why the long bolts wouldn't sit flush. Another thing I missed was that my friend also let me know that the caps needed to be arranged in accordance with the oil bypass tube. So what he means by that is that the cam cap arrows were supposed to face forward or the timing. So I basically just need to turn them around so the holes on the oil bypass tube can line up with the holes on the cam caps. And I'm just thinking to myself like, hey, more practice on assembling these heads, I guess. But like I said, I'm learning, so it's all good. He was relaying the info to me about how the oil bypass tube has a job to lubricate, which is why we want to make sure that the passages are clear of anything, with some compressed air, and it's good to go. So once I relocate the cam caps and add on the oil bypass tube, then that means that the short bolts will fit on both ends of the timing cap. And as for the 3 long bolts, which will be responsible for securing the oil bypass tube. Okay, so now that I'm all caught up, let's go ahead and start the disassembly process. So as you can see here, I initially had this cam cap facing to the right, but it's actually supposed to be facing to the left. My left, to be clear. And here is a close-up of how the cam caps are supposed to be installed. Okay, y'all, let's get this thing buttoned up. The shape of this assembled 3.5 liter was kinda difficult to balance. That's why you can see me struggling. I kind of first surrounded it with more blocks, but I got it down to 2. Here I was pretty much saying how scared I was because just by knowing my luck, it's not good. I went ahead and installed the valves because they needed to be calibrated. Alright y'all, thank you for watching me have fun assembling this Ford F-150 3.5 liter cylinder head.